Hello. I like your sewing machine.
I've had it since I was about 23 and I love it. It just goes forwards and backwards and occasionally zigzag.
So we've been friends for quite a few years now through our shared love of textiles. And you have quite a few strings to your bow. You make the most beautiful quilts. You're a paper cut artist. And you've also appeared on the BBC TV programme Make Craft Britain. What was it like being on TV?
It was really exciting, and actually the woman who was the producer and director on it, she'd been a costume designer, so we immediately had a lovely bond over textiles and making, and it was just a joy to do. It was really exciting. So I consider myself really lucky because I did actually get the job of my dreams. And from being really small and addicted to Blue Peter and Vision On, all I wanted to do was to make pictures for television. I did moving image and animation a little bit at college, not huge amounts. I did other things as well. And I got my job at the BBC as a graphic design assistant and rose up through the ranks and became a graphic designer, which involved designing title sequence for everything, from Our Friends in the North, the Queen's Christmas Speech, you name it. One of my favourite jobs, which I did there, was a thing called Mad About Music. And I came up with this idea based on working straight onto the film with Letters and inks, and then I spent days and days editing it together digitally. But out of that came a whole series of stills that I was able to pull from the moving sequence. And one of them I really loved, and I was thinking, oh, I'd love to get this made into a rug. And I had no idea how to make a rug, but I did know how to do needlepoint. So I made this little thing, which is a glasses case. This was in the days before mobile phones. So it's a glasses case. And the design was, it's a still from the sequence, which I just lifted off and translated into stitching. And I love that. I love that when you get two completely different disciplines colliding and you come up with something, you know, quite unique. And that happens quite a lot in my work. And it makes me sort of a bit uncategorizable and unpigeonholable, if that's such a word.
So let's talk about some of your quilts, because I know you're a huge fan of the improv work of the Gees Bend Quilters, aren't you?
I am, yes. The spirit in which those quilts are made, that's what gets me excited. You know, you make do with what you've got. You don't go out and go and buy, you know, a bundle load of, excuse me here, pack quarters or, you know, jelly rolls, that sort of thing. You know, if you do want to go and buy new fabric, you go to the charity shop or car boot sales. I mean, I love car boot sales for fabric. You know, I can spot a quilt across a field. There's a quilt, the shirts quilt. I saw that at a car boot sale. It was way over the other side of the field and I just made a beeline for it. It was a pile of shirts. And I said to the woman, the shirts, how much are they? And she said they're 50p each. 6 shirts, £3 for a quilt. So I bought them, beautiful quality cotton, washed a gazillion times, chopped it all up. It was just so liberating. And I think one of the things about Gees Bend that gets me very excited is the way that they just use fabric in this kind of, they eat up every little last scrap of what they've got available to them. And that kind of liberated me in thinking about how you could use every bit. So instead of cutting out just the plain bits of fabric and throwing away the seams, I deliberately include all the seaming and details like the buttonholes and the plackets. I keep all that in there because I think that gives you provenance as to where your quilt has come from, and it makes it much more interesting. You know, and people look at my quilts and they sort of see the overall thing and they get up close and they go, oh, well, there's a buttonhole there. Well, you can put your finger in this bit, there's a pocket. And I just think that makes them so tactile and much more, so it gives them a real history to them. I just think there's enough fabric in the world without going to buy new fabric. There's enough fabric that needs saving from landfills that can be made into beautiful things. You know, I like using denim. It's great because you've got two sides of it, you've got two tones of it. There's gazillion different versions of the blue. You can use all those beautiful seams in there. And it's just so tough, and there's something gutsy about denim, which I just love. I curse every time I put it through my sewing machine, you know, but you know, it works. So I do like incorporating a bit of denim into what I do if I can. You know, if you look at the quilts of Gees Bend, they use all sorts of things jammed in together. I've got no qualms about mixing denim with ticking, with velvet, with, you know, a bit of shirt and a bit. It doesn't matter to me. It's about having, well, first of all, it's about having fun with the fabric and enjoying yourself, because there's no point in doing these things if it's a stress. And if you get to a point where you're having to unpick seams, I think that's quite stressful. So I kind of just scoot over that. And if something's a bit too long, then I cut it down. And if it's a bit too short, I just add another bit on. So when I start a project, it's usually been mulling around up here for a while, on the back burner, as they say. And I don't do a lot of really detailed drawing. I mean, this is the drawing, the only drawing that I did for the Ready Pink quilt. And that is as precise as it gets. And to me, if you spend a lot of time working on graph paper and squared paper and measuring things out to the nth degree, you just take all that spontaneity and love out of what you're doing. I know there are people who will disagree with me on that, but for me, it just kills it. You know, I just want a rough thing. I can refer to and go, oh yeah, I've done that square now. Oh, let's try that one over there, you know, and it kind of grows very organically. So I've got, these are some little tiny panels I use as teaching samplers. I can look at that and I can tell you precisely the order in which that was put together. The other thing about this little piece is it's actually stitched by hand. And I went to see Tracy Chevalier give a talk on the back of the Last Runaway book that she did, which is well worth reading, by the way. If you like quilts and you like reading, do read it. All her samples were done by hand. So I put this together and it's just running stitch. And I thought, well, you know, if you did, I'll say this very quickly, 20 pieces like this, you'd have a quilt in no time at all. And you can do one of those in an evening. All you need really for those, rotary cutter, straight edge and a cutting mat, off you go, you know. And I don't really measure anything, I just hack things up. So I've got a whole load of strips to play with. And then I start playing and stitching and cutting and off, you know, it's great. It's so liberating. I love it. So yeah, my planning is loose deliberately. And to me, you know, the creative process is as much about some of the accidents that you then think, oh, do you know what? That's really interesting. And if you hadn't gone through the other bit first, you'd never have gone to that bit. And I think patchworking, when you do improvised patchworking, can have a huge dollop of that.
So have you got one or two quilts there that you can share with us?
I've got this one, which is fairly riotous in its colours and patterns. It came out of last summer when I decided to have a major re-going through all my fabrics. And I got everything out onto the lawn. It was a nice hot day. There was piles of fabrics and I was so excited because I love that when you get random combinations and you think, oh, I never thought of putting that with that. And I wanted to make something which had this sort of riotous, joyful feel about it. So these fabrics, there is everything, all sorts of things that people have donated to me, leftover bits that I've had for years. I mean, there's some ancient, this is a very, very ancient bit of habitat in here. From years ago when they did something. Oh, is that habitat? That might be Laura Ashley. There's a bit of habitat in here. This is a 1950s dress somebody gave me a clip of that her mum used to be a dressmaker. So masses of history in this quilt and I love it. It's not quite finished because I've got to the bit where I've got to, you know, do the wadding and do the quilting. So that's one mad concoction. The quilt that I've been doing in lockdown, which is my Blue Cross quilt, and I wanted to make something that was on the theme of the NHS blue, but also using the idea of crosses, you know, and the Red Cross, and crosses are a big symbol for health services. And there's all sorts of stuff in here. This is glazed cotton, and you can see that I've just, you know, even though it's quite rigorous in its structure, I've still been patching pieces together to make, you know, enough panel so that I can get the square out. This is some very ancient stuff I picked up at a sale, a bit of furnishing fabric. You know, there's a whole mishmash of stuff in here. It's not been wadded or quilted yet, and I'm just still battling, mentally having a little battle about how I am going to quilt it, but I'm sort of thinking about maybe doing something just in the middle of each cross. It will be something I'll do by hand, because I don't machine quilt these things, partly because my beautiful old Singer wouldn't cope with it, and I do feel that when things have been overly quilted, you kind of get another texture altogether. You know, there was a style of quilting where you used to just use buttons and tie things on, and that suits me really well, especially when I'm using shirts, and I can just cut all those buttons off before I start working with the clothes and chopping them up, and then I go back and I reincorporate all the buttons back into the quilt as the actual quilting devices, which I really enjoy doing. Also, while I've been in lockdown, I've been looking at a new technique. Well, it's not new. I was inspired by some borrow quilts, which I saw a few years ago at Somerset House. There was the most beautiful exhibition. You wouldn't think you could cry at an exhibition of quilts, but you could. And the borrow quilts are Japanese. They are built up of layers and layers of layers of fabrics which have had umpteen lives before they finally got to being incorporated into a quilt. And they are very moving. I mean, what I've done with it, you can't describe as moving, but the inspiration came from there. This idea of just relayering and patching together in a sort of a very lively kind of organic way. So the first things I started doing, because people still had their birthdays in lockdown, did you notice? And I was wanting to make things I could send to them. So I started doing these little panels, which I then folded in half, and I would make into either glasses or a phone case. And what I've done here is they've got a backing on them, which is just calico. And then I've cut up the fabric, or in some cases just used very small bits of fabric, laid them down, and then I've just run a machine vertically and horizontally across, just to sort of hold it in place. Then I've gone in and I've started embellishing it and doing sort of like stab stitching all round with embroidery thread. And it's just been so exciting and liberating and so therapeutic. So I've made loads. So here's one just using a very simple motif of stripes, because people say, you know, when they look at my work and they go, well, how do you do that? And say, well, actually, it's really simple. If you just break it down into stripes and then just add a bit in the middle of each stripe and then throw it off wonk. That's how it works. And so this one is just, again, horizontal and vertical stripes on this backing. And I haven't actually worked into this in any more detail. But pièce de résistance of this is this bag, which has got lots of things which I love. It's got a big chunk of denim across the bottom. This 196, this was on the inside pocket of the jeans, and I thought, oh, I can't get rid of that. You know, got my graphic designer typography head on. You know, who'd throw that out? And the technique for this was I did two big panels of the pieced parts. You can see I've got denim in here. There's bits of shirting, there's a little bit of, oh, I love this sort of resist thing. Laid them all out, machined it all into place, just using verticals. And then I went back and I've just discovered Shashko thread, which is my new favourite go-to thread. Here we have it. Lovely stuff. It's so smooth. When you work with it, it just glides through the fabric. It's, oh, yummy. I'd eat it if I could, but you know, it's thread. And I've done running stitch in Shashko all over this, just in vertical blue. And then I went back and I did even more detailing in a little bit of old thread that I found on a wooden spool somebody gave to me, and I thought, oh, that'll do for that. So I'm not a very, you know, people get very uptight about what threads you use and what needles you should use for these things, and I just go, I'll try it out. If it works, it works, and if it doesn't, I won't. So yeah, this will be forever my big creation, possibly even more so than my quilt.
So looking to the future, what sort of things are you looking forward to?
I'm really looking forward to starting teaching. So the way I teach, I find appeals to people who are beginners, and they've perhaps been a bit intimidated by that very rigorous approach to patchwork, you know, where the patchwork police come in and they measure things and say, well, it doesn't quite align, does it? Let's unpick it all again. And you go, why would you, really? That's so soul destroying. You know, there's ways around it, and have some fun with it. And you really do want people to enjoy doing this, because it will come out then in what they're making.
Thank you, Christine. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you today.
It's been a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. These strange times, it's nice to sit down and have a really lovely conversation with a friend to chat about a subject which we both love and adore and gets us so excited.